This is Peyton Jones with Church Planter Magazine, and I am here with a guy that I admire the heck out of. His name's Hugh Halter. He's written many, many books. He's written The Tangible Kingdom. He's written Purpose-Driven Church. No, I'm teasing. No, he has written lots of good books. He wrote Sacrilege, and he's got a new book out. This is called Bi-Vo. And Hugh, good to have you, man.
Nice to be here, dude.
Subtitle is A Modern-Day Guide for Bi-Vocational Saints. Tell us about it, man.
That's actually our story. So a lot of people know us from the Tangible Kingdom and all, the other stuff we've done. But the sort of the backstory of that is that I was a house painter for 20 years. Got me through college, got me through seminary. It was basically what I did when we planted our first church in Portland. And it was maybe 7-8 years ago. I was talking to my wife, and she goes, "Hey, do you realize that you've always been like a full-time minister? Like, that's all you've ever thought about is full-time ministry, but you've never been paid more than a third of what we need."
Yeah.
And it at first hit me. So there wasn't any bivocational books. I don't ever remember even knowing the term. But I do remember thinking, I wonder if our story is weird or if it's normal. To literally feel full-time called to ministry but not make your full-time income. Now, when we did the church, the Tangible Kingdom story, the backstory of that, again, is that we decided to bylaw that we would only have sort of top end, might be part-time, 50% paid staff, because we were trying to break that financial bind that a lot of guys get into where, if you take money from anywhere, you feel like you're on the hook, whether or not you take denominational money to plant, or you're pastoring in an existing church. If you take the full salary, you actually have to do what those people are expecting you to do. And in a missional environment where, sometimes a lot of what you do isn't producing any fruit, guys and gals get stuck. They go, why am I doing this? But now what do I do? Now I'm stuck with this. So a lot of the conversations at large conferences or small conferences, guys would come up and go, "Okay, tell me more about this bivocational thing." And it was just in hundreds of conversations with leaders that I went, this has got to be where we're going, because as the church begins to and is imploding, you see the carnage. You got guys that have never learned a trade that are now 55. Their church finally dies. They don't have any way to make a living. And they're good-hearted leaders. They're stuck. So we thought, based on where we know the church is going, there's going to be less and less church. Yeah. I mean, if we are going to be Canada, UK, Australia in 10, 15 years, that means very few of us are going to be able to make our full living from the gospel, so to speak. But what if that's good? What if that's what God's doing to help us reposition back into the culture, back into the marketplace? So the subtitle, Learning to Leverage All of Life into One Calling, was my heart to realize that, look, it doesn't matter if you're a painter or a priest or whatever. We're all called to live every second we have for the Lord. Yeah. And so some of the stuff we bring up in the book is some prophetic calls of Jesus where he says, look, you cannot serve both God and money. I don't know if there's any clear, if you really want to serve me, you cannot be tied to this money thing like you are. And he also says if you're trying to please men, you can't be a servant of God. So those are generally the two main reasons why we do ministry, right? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it was out of that Reveal study, there was another assessment that came out that said 85 to 90% of pastors would immediately leave their job if they could go make a living somewhere else, which means most of us aren't liking working inside the house, so to speak. Okay, absolutely. So you look at those two issues and you go, okay, maybe God's setting the stage for a movement of missionary saints that are bankers and plumbers and moms and dads. And so part of the book is that prophetic call to go, look, take a gut check here. Have you done the kiss of death like Judas did? Good guy, loved Jesus, but he was the treasurer for the guys, and that's how he got taken down. So the money was tied to ministry. So we help you assess, are you getting close to the kiss of death where you start to question your motives for serving God? And then we go into actually practical stuff about how to actually do church cheaper. So if God builds his church around your life, how to not get stuck making the same bad decisions that lock you out of God's mission. So we expose a lot of what happened behind the scenes of Adullam, where we would structure it so it stayed lean. We decentralized money. We decentralized almost everything. And so in there we're saying that the more you decentralize into the people of God, the cheaper church is. So we give you some ideas on how to do that. You generally only have to pay money for what you centralize.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
So we just go, you may still have some expenses, but it doesn't nearly cost that much.
Yeah.
And then we go into the personal aspect, how you learn sort of what we call the knacks of bivocational living, just practical stuff. So the back third of the book is just things that I learned to do. Our son had severe epilepsy, so, it wasn't just that I was working a job painting, but it was I wasn't getting any sleep every night, maybe an hour of sleep. So learning how to function between different vocations, if you will, how to manage your own personal life, how to manage your spiritual life, just stuff like that. So that's essentially the book. It's really short, just trying to basically be an encouragement, a thumbs up for leaders that go, are there any other ways than just this church thing or be a missionary? Is there maybe 100 different ways in between? We bring a lot of ideas for business, for mission ventures in there. Yeah. Unbelievable stories all around the world of guys and gals that are going, look, I'm going to do this and cause that to be my missional base. Yeah. So I think it's encouraging. So
yeah, I've been bivocational for 12 years, really? Man. Yeah, I headed off to the mission field, went to Wales. The anniversary of my bivocationalism was 9/11 because charities dropped in half. Totally. My mission board called me and said, hey, man, we can't pay you. I was a statistic. I went to work in a factory. I was working at Lloyd Jones's church in Britain, and I was their evangelist. When I was full-time, I was doing all kinds of crazy stuff like all the stuff you don't want to do, but in Britain they said, that's how we do it. Did all that stuff, no fruit. Got working on a factory, making TVs for Sony. 3 people came to faith within the first couple months. And I went, man, and that sowed the seed for church planting. God never let me stop being bivocational until this day, because I still I can't help it. Like, I'm addicted to church planting where the need is. And there's a big difference between where the money is and where the need is. So I'm in inner city urban church planting. I was talking to one of the organizations out at the booth today here, where they said, we'll loan you $100,000 and you pay it back. And I was laughing because we were going to do an interview, and I said, look, most of the guys I work with, they plant in places where there ain't never going to be $100,000 coming back.
It's not going to come back.
Yeah. So most of our congregants are like addicts, ex-cons. They can't get jobs.
It's not
prostitutes.
What we call sustainable, and that's what we've tended to shoot. We've put this bar, like, what you're really shooting for is sustainable.
Absolutely.
There's not a whole lot in Scripture about sustainable. Not that you shouldn't be. Not that God isn't going to bless. I mean, we're in a place that has funded missions all over the world because of huge money coming in. So nothing specifically wrong with that. But if your goal is that we're going to be sustainable, if you're called to the margins of society, you're not going to, and literally Jesus, calls us to the margins. So he's calling us to essentially ministry that will generally not give back.
Absolutely.
And so to me, it's an issue of personal calling. So like in the book, I don't say that bivocational is better way to go, but I say it might be better for some of you.
Amen.
You're losing your heart. You go, I want freedom to do this. So we basically say you have permission. God not only gives you permission, but he goes, I've made you that way. So don't take the money from here.
You've hit on something, I think, too, like the freedom that you have from not getting your paycheck from the church. So, like, people, when they pay you, they think they own you.
Yes.
So suddenly you're free
or even
now.
Internally, you just feel, I know, wherever I take money, I just feel like I need to be responsible. So
I think when people see their leader who is working a job like them and then ministering, there's this respect that you gain. There's a street cred that you gain. It
does help. So like Paul, you see Paul at times, he's trying to raise money for other guys, and he'll say, look, a workman's worthy of his hire, right? Yeah. So he's basically saying, like, if I was trying to raise money for you, I'd say, hey, Peyton's worthy of it, so let's help him. Yeah. But for Paul, who was more a missionary himself, he would say to other people, like for one church, he said, for you guys, I decided to work amongst you so as not to be a burden. So Paul, you get Paul, the over-pastor that's trying to raise money, and yet Paul the missionary goes, but for me, for this context, it's better that I not. And I think that's the option is, if you're fully vocational in the world, secular job, that's not better either. It's hard work either way, right? It takes just as much faith to live as a banker as it does a pastor who's always saying, well, we're living by faith. No, everybody lives by faith. Yeah. It's no better being bivocational. It's just hard. Your fight's being secularly vocationed, you have your own fights. Bi-Vocational has fight, but you also have fight if you take the money. So you have to kind of go, what would I prefer to be the base of my operation?
Yeah.
Based on who I am. I know people I've talked to, I share this, and you can see them go do an entrepreneurial deal, and they just rock star it. And you go, that was perfect for you. You see other people that love the idea and try to go do business, but they're not gifted in that. And so sometimes you go, look, stay in. And I think, it gives you that option. At least Bi-Vo at least is an option for you to consider.
Yeah.
So.
And some guys, they're bivocational, not by choice. Like some guys don't have any other option. Like you said,
Like about half of the pastors in America are not paid at all in our ethnic communities. We never talk about these guys that just work their butts off in the streets and never get a dime for what they do. So.
I love your titles, man. First off, what's cool about this book, I was flipping through it. It says Table of Action. And then it says in parentheses, contents don't do much for you.
just a thought that hit me while I was writing that. So.
I like that. And here's some of the titles. The Ship Has Tipped. This one was great. This is the first one. I thought I'd dig on that. Inventing vocabulary. It was nimbility.
Actually, did a blog on that years ago, but it was about the freedom that we had. It was out a day that it snowed like 3 feet, and we were able to just Facebook all of our people and say, hey, enjoy the day.
It's awesome.
Another buddy of mine was a megachurch pastor. I called him. I said, hey, what happened? Did you have to cancel? He goes, yeah, we had to cancel church. And he goes, that put us back. It'll take us 9 months, maybe a year to recoup all that money we lost. And I just thought, man, so much funner to be nimble.
Yeah.
And have that ability to be nimble. So that was that idea.
Here's one called A Story of How Church Just Happened. Another chapter is Cheap Church Uncracked, Full-Time Futility, Cheap Gatherings, Learning the Labyrinth Labyrinth, depending on where you're at. If you're in Britain, you say labyrinth.
Labyrinth, okay.
A Bi-Vocational Life, Epic Failure, Cheap Legacy, Final Words and Backstories. It just, it's got some great titles, man.
It looks skinny, doesn't it? It doesn't even look like a book. You might be able to read that in one sitting.
Yeah. Well, you know what?
In the morning.
Maybe that's your point. So. Maybe that's what you're trying to do. But, that's what I dig, is it's practical. I've read your stuff before. You don't write like way up here, like philosophy.
I can't.
Amen, brother.
So
you're preaching to the choir now.
So we have, if you go now on the Missio site, you'll see we're just starting to form what we call a Bi-Vo network, and if that's kind of what you're thinking, or you just want support, or every once in a while to go find some people that are doing that, you can go to that site. We'll start loading up stories. Great stories. Joey Turner out of Fort Worth. We have in the back of the book. Instead of funding the church plant through just tithes, they started a brew pub. It's going awesome. So awesome. A little bit of Joey's story in there. But we'll start loading stories. We'll start doing webinars. And if people just need help just to be encouraged by it, we'll do that. We're also going to connect with 3DM. That's really started, we're working for more ministry, working towards secular vocation. Yeah. 3DM's done a great job with what we call 5 capitals, and they're working for marketplace leaders that are now trying to get maximum kingdom leverage. So we're going to kind of start working to the center from each angle. So if people that are listening to this are not pastors, they're actually in the marketplace, you can also go to the Missio site. The back of the book actually connects to the 5 capitals thing. Wow. That will help those leaders as well. So awesome. Awesome, man. Well, Hugh, thanks for writing to guys like me. You bet. And tons of guys, because I think most of our church planners out there, I don't have statistics, but I would guess that most of them out there are bivocational. Yeah. The guys starting stuff, particularly in areas that are needy. Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, man. Right, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. You bet.